Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending of course on what time it is when you decide to follow this video. To begin, lay down on the mat with the knees bent, feet hip distance apart, and elevate through the spine. Pay particular attention to lengthening through the nape of the neck. Draw the shelf of the skull away from the spine, and it should feel like your chin is slightly tucking, the head is slightly tilted. If you need a support, you could have a pillow or something under the head. The legs are relaxed, the head is relaxed, and it stays still. Start with some focused breathing. Take a wide breath in and a slower breath out. Breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. Breathe in through the nose, nice slow breath in, but even slower out through the mouth. Use your breathing like this to slow and calm your mind and body, your heart rate, releasing tension and getting you a little bit more focused. Remember to aim, as you're breathing in, to send the ribs more sideways towards your arms or your elbows, and backwards, expanding and opening the back of the chest and ribs more into the floor. So as we breathe in, you want that feeling that you're moving and opening sideways and backwards rather than forwards of the body. Really try and get more air to the bottom of the lungs, which is where the bottom of your ribs are, closest to your belly button. If it helps, therefore, when you start with this breathing, put your hands on the bottom of the ribs closest to your belly button, your waist. As you breathe in and breathe out, and try and imagine that you're sending the air to where your hands touch those ribs. Try and focus the air further down into the bottom of the lungs. Take your time to breathe like that, and then once you have taken a few breaths in that way, hopefully your breathing will have naturally started to slow. We're going to start to work with some pelvic tilting. Keep the head and legs still. Tilt the pelvis north. That's where water would flow towards the top of your bowl or towards your head. Recover to neutral, and then arch the pelvis south, which is where water would trickle out of the bottom of the bowl towards your feet. Pause each time you pass through neutral to notice what that feels like before you begin that movement again. North, neutral, south, neutral. Remember, the water pours north because it generally is a bigger and easier movement, but don't press into the feet. And the water trickles south because it's usually a smaller movement, but don't let the head tip back or arch. So nice and smooth and controlled. As you pass through neutral, just briefly pause, or at least recognize that neutral alignment. How does it compare between north and south, and how does that feel in your body? Now when you've done 4 or 5 like that, come back to your neutral position, and then keeping the upper body still, tip your pelvic bowl so that water pours out of your bowl east or west, if you decide which side you call east or west, right or left, doesn't matter. Then come back into neutral, legs move with you, and tip over to the other side. Now the movement is going across your body, east, central or neutral, west. And this movement creates a little bit of rotation in the spine and works muscles that work across your body, right to left, whereas previously, north-south, we were working muscles that went in line with your spine. So we're creating different mobility, anything which moves you out of neutral or moves joints, hip, spine, lumbar spine, the muscles and joints working around the pelvis as well. Anything that takes you out of neutral is going to create mobility, moving the joints. And then the muscles that work to bring you back to that safe neutral zone are strengthening muscles. And those are the muscles that you're going to be using when we hold ourselves in neutral or return the alignment back to neutral so that we are in that stable alignment. So we've got this lovely combination between mobility, release, and strength and tone. And we've done it with movements that go in line with the spine, and now east-west with movements that go across the spine. To get a little bit more intensity as we're going across, imagine there's a line drawn across the back of your pelvis and on the mat, should I say. So the line's on the mat, but underneath your pelvis. And you're going to press the back of your pelvis down as you move your pelvis sideways. The movement will become smaller, more of a trickle. Press down and into the mat or into the floor as you move over to the other side. Now pressing down creates intensity because you're effectively pressing into the floor. The floor is not going to move, so it creates a reaction of tone and makes this movement more intense. I hope you'll start to feel the muscles working across the lower part of your tummy here. Make sure that the tension is in the back of the pelvis where it physically touches the mat, not in the inner thighs or the feet. The feet and the legs should stay relaxed. And remember, the thighs remain parallel. They should come with the movement rather than creating the movement. So the pelvis moves and the legs just happen to come with that. Now that's a great way of creating tone. The upper body stays still as you're doing that. Now coming back to your neutral alignment. So we've warmed up with different movements, different control. Now we're going to make the movement a little bit more complicated. Imagine your pelvis is like a square, and we're now going to move across the diagonal of that square from one diagonal corner past neutral through neutral to the opposite. So visualize one diagonal line from the left top corner, kind of near where your waist would be, across to the right opposite bottom diagonal corner, which is sort of towards where the back of your right heel would be. Just visualize that diagonal line first, and then start to move through it. Tip your bowl towards the top left-hand corner. Start to then move through neutral towards the opposite bottom right-hand diagonal corner. And then you're going to return through neutral and repeat that diagonal line. Making sure that you don't grip with the inner thighs or clench. Try not to overly move the head or tense up anywhere else, but the focus really is that diagonal movement. You can control the legs and the head a little bit more once you're familiar with this controlled range or direction. It's a bit more complicated, it requires more fine-tuning than just the normal up, down or across. It's diagonal, it's a slightly more complicated movement, and it requires a slightly more focused control to get that movement going through, let alone being able to do it without gripping or pressing through the feet. So now you might imagine that you're going sort of northeast to southwest. It's a diagonal movement that's a little bit more fine-tuned. When you've done that 4, 5, 6 times, you're then going to just come back to neutral and imagine the opposite diagonal line. So if you think about your pelvis like a square, the top right-hand corner would be towards your right side of the waist. The opposite diagonal corner would be towards the back of your left heel. Just imagine that diagonal line before you start to move across it. Then moving, tip to that top right-hand corner, passing through neutral, move diagonally across and down to the bottom left-hand corner. Each time you move, whether you're on your way upwards to the top corner or on your way downwards to the opposite bottom, you are drawing this diagonal line, trying to keep the upper body roughly still, the legs and feet roughly relaxed, try not to grip through. And of course, each time, whether you're on your way down or up, you are pausing or at least noticing neutral before you then start to carry on with the journey either down or up. So mobilizing in a more fine-tuned way, creating a different awareness of what neutral is, because some of us might accidentally be slightly stuck northwest all the time. And the theory is that by the time we've done these kinds of movements, going through the different possibilities, offering our alignment, our positioning, if you like, different alternatives, releasing muscles that might be tight, stimulating other muscles that might not be used to working. It should make it easier for us to find a more symmetrical neutral alignment. So just through movement, you can release muscles that might keep pulling you or hold you in maybe unwanted kind of alignment. This is nice for your own awareness and control. Can you feel the difference between north to south and diagonal? It's nice for your focus because you have to be thinking it's a little bit more complicated than the normal or more familiar movements. But the theory is that by the time we've done these pelvic compass movements in those different directions, we should be more symmetrical than when we started. So let's just have a feel for that. Coming back to neutral and just relaxing the back of the pelvis just into a comfortable position, don't try and control it. Would you say that you've got even weight through the right and left sides of your body? Would you say that you've got more weight towards the tailbone or more weight towards the back of the waist? Is it level? And is there a sense, you might need to close your eyes and think about it, that you're slightly tipped or offset to one diagonal? And if you do have that sense, maybe you can draw yourself back into neutral, but there could be a reason why you're being pulled out of alignment towards that diagonal or whatever, and that might be because muscles are either tight or weak and struggling for whatever reason. So before you begin the pelvic compass, and then after you've done it, and maybe even after you've done some exercises, refer back to the before and after and see if you can tell whether it has changed something. Now for now, we're going to finish before we come up to standing, just with a little bit of cat-camel, because it's such a nice way of finishing. If you are uncomfortable on your hands, go onto your elbows and remember the movement rounding your back. You're going to look at your knees, tuck your tail under, camel, arching your back. You're looking up, your lower back dips, tail in the air, cat. Now those are the two extreme movements, but actually we want to try and focus into doing a more shallow version of those movements so that it's not quite so extreme, either the camel or the cat shape, but you're more focused on the way that you pass from one shape to the other. If you do it on your elbows, your head will be lower than your tailbone. If you do it on your hands, then your head and tailbone should be roughly at the same height when you come back to neutral and parallel to the floor. So there's neutral, and then you're going to go past neutral into the new shape. And there's neutral, and then you're going to go past neutral into the next shape. And just as we're doing the last few cat-camel movements, remember, if you are on your wrists, put the pads of the fingers down first, then go down onto the knuckles, gradually going through the hands, slide the thumbs away until the heels of the hands are on the floor. This distributes more weight through all of the structures in your hands, so they're all contributing a little bit more, taking the strain off of the wrists and giving you a little bit more support and strengthening through the fingers. That's really well worth bearing in mind. This is great for strengthening the joints in the hands, and it's so much safer for the wrists. And of course, if and when you need to, you can come off of that entirely and go onto the forearms. Make sure that you come up to standing carefully when you do come up.